My mother called me 4 days before the family birthday party. She said she needed to talk to me about Rosie. Rosie is my 3-year-old daughter. My mother said she did not think Rosie should come to the party. She said Rosie was too wild. She said Rosie would ruin the photos. She said it like it was a reasonable thing to say about a 3-year-old child. I held the phone for a long moment. And then I made a decision that my mother did not see coming. Welcome to Haely Stories. This is the place where you will find real and emotional women's stories that will touch your heart, make you feel seen, and remind you that you are never alone in what you are going through. If that is something you need in your life, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a single story. Now let me tell you about the phone call that made me understand exactly what my mother valued, and the choice I made that put my daughter first. My name is Bella Wandi and I am 30 years old. I want to start by telling you about Rosie, because she is the reason this story exists and because you cannot understand what I did without understanding who she is. Rosie is 3 years old. She has dark curly hair that refuses to be tamed and enormous brown eyes and a laugh that starts somewhere deep in her belly and fills every room she enters. She is, by any objective measure, a spirited child. She has opinions about everything: which cup she drinks from, which shoes she wears, which story comes first at bedtime, the precise and non-negotiable order of her morning routine. She approaches the world with a confidence and a volume that I find both exhausting and completely extraordinary. She is also 3 years old. Which means that what my mother called wild is what every developmental specialist in the world would call entirely, perfectly, wonderfully normal. Rosie does not sit still for long. She touches things. She asks questions at the wrong moments. She runs when she is supposed to walk and speaks when she is supposed to be quiet and laughs when the room calls for seriousness. She is 3. These are not character flaws. These are the features of being 3. I have spent 30 years being my mother's daughter and I understand her better than almost anyone. She is a woman who cares enormously about how things look. About presentation. About the image that is carried forward from any occasion, particularly in photographs, which she treats as the official record of a family's history and which she approaches with a curator's eye and a perfectionist's anxiety. I have always accommodated this. I have spent my whole life accommodating it. The phone call about Rosie was the moment I stopped. My mother's name is Sandra and she is 58 years old and she has been the organizer of our family's occasions for as long as I can remember. She is good at it. I want to give her that. The parties she organizes are beautiful. The tables are set perfectly. The flowers are always exactly right. The photographs, and there are always photographs, a professional hired for every significant occasion, capture something that genuinely looks like the family she has always wanted us to be. I say the family she has always wanted us to be because there is a distinction, in our family, between the version that appears in those photographs and the version that exists in the ordinary days between them. The photograph version is composed and coordinated and smiling in a way that communicates ease. The ordinary version is messier and more complicated and more real. My mother has always preferred the photograph version. Not out of dishonesty, I do not think she is a dishonest person. Out of a genuine belief that the image of a family is something worth curating. That how things look, in the record that is kept, is something that matters. I grew up understanding this. I grew up dressing carefully for family occasions and sitting up straight in photographs and managing whatever I was actually feeling so that it did not appear on my face in a way that would cause a problem. I managed all of this without much difficulty because I was the kind of child who could manage it. I was quiet by nature and compliant by habit, and I fit my mother's photograph version without too much effort. Rosie does not fit it. Rosie is not a child who can be composed for a camera. She is a child who moves and laughs and pulls faces and does whatever she feels like doing in the moment she feels like doing it. She is the truest version of herself at all times, and at 3 years old she has not yet learned, and should not yet have learned, that there is any other version expected. My mother had managed Rosie's presence at family occasions with increasing visible strain for the past year. I had seen it. I had tried to manage it, keeping Rosie close, redirecting her energy, doing all of the things that parents do at formal occasions to minimize the chaos a toddler introduces into a room, but I had not understood, until that phone call, how far my mother was willing to take it. My mother called on a Tuesday evening. She opened the call with some pleasantries: how was I, how was work, how was Rosie, and I answered them without suspicion because there was nothing in her tone that signaled what was coming. Then she said, "Bella, I wanted to talk to you about the party on Saturday." The party was my aunt's 60th birthday. A significant occasion, the kind my mother had been planning for weeks. Catering, flowers, a photographer booked months in advance. Around 40 guests. I said, "Of course." "What is it?" She said, "I have been thinking about it and I really feel that it might be better if Rosie did not come." I said, "I am sorry." She said, "You know how she is at these things. She gets overstimulated and then she gets difficult, and last time she interrupted the photographs 3 times and the photographer had to retake so many shots. And this is your aunt's 60th, Bella. I want the photos to be right. I want everything to be right." I sat with what she had just said for a moment. I said, "Mum, she is 3 years old." She said, "I know that. But she is very energetic. And I just think it would be easier for everyone, including you, if she was not there. You could get a sitter and actually enjoy yourself." I said, "Mum, are you asking me to leave my 3-year-old daughter at home because she might disrupt the photographs?" She said, "I am asking you to consider what is best for the occasion." I held the phone against my ear and I looked across the room at Rosie, who was at that moment sitting on the floor building a tower of blocks with the focused seriousness that she brought to construction projects, her tongue slightly between her teeth, her curls falling across her forehead. I said, "I need to think about this. I will call you back." I ended the call. I sat with the call for a long time before I did anything else. Not because I was uncertain about what I thought, but because I wanted to be sure that what I thought was not just a reaction, that I was not responding from the sharp immediate heat of having heard something that upset me, but from something more considered and more honest. I thought about Rosie. About the specific experience of being told, even indirectly and with the buffer of her age, that she was not wanted somewhere. Children understand more than we credit them with understanding. At 3 she would not have grasped the politics of why she was not at the party. But she would have felt the absence. She would have known that a family occasion was happening and that she was not there. I thought about my mother's reasoning. About the photographs. About the particular hierarchy of values it revealed, the image of the occasion placed above the presence of a child. A 3-year-old child. Her granddaughter. I thought about what I would be teaching Rosie if I left her at home. Not explicitly, she was 3, I would not have explained it to her. But implicitly. The lesson underneath the action. That her energy and her liveliness and her absolute 3-year-old authenticity were things to be managed and minimized and kept out of certain rooms. I did not want to teach her that. I thought about what I would be teaching myself if I complied. That the image of the family mattered more than the members of it. That a 3-year-old's welcome at a family gathering was conditional on her behavior being convenient for the photographs. I did not want to learn that either. I called my mother back 40 minutes after the first call, and my mother answered with the particular expectant quality of someone who believes they are about to hear the answer they were hoping for. I said, "Mum, I have thought about what you said." She said, "Good. I think when you think it through you will see that it is the practical. I said, Rosie and I will not be coming on Saturday. A pause. She said, what? I said, if Rosie is not welcome at the party then I will not be at the party either. I am not going to attend a family occasion from which my daughter has been excluded. She said, Bella, that is not what I said. I said it might be easier. I said, Mum, you said you did not want her there because she would ruin the photographs. That is what you said. And I need you to understand that I am not able to show up to a family birthday party and smile for those photographs knowing that my daughter was considered a disruption to be avoided. She said, you are being dramatic. I said, I am being clear. Rosie is 3 years old and she is my daughter and she is your granddaughter, and if she is not welcome then neither am I. My mother said several things after that. She said I was overreacting. She said I was making it about me. She said my aunt would be upset. She said I was ruining the occasion more than Rosie ever could have. I listened to all of it. Then I said, I am sorry that my absence is going to be difficult. I genuinely am. But I am not going to be somewhere that my daughter is not welcome. I hope you understand that. I ended the call. On Saturday morning Rosie woke up early the way she always did, with immediate and complete energy, as though sleep was simply a pause in the ongoing project of being Rosie and she was eager to resume it. She wanted pancakes. We made pancakes together, which took twice as long as it would have taken me alone and produced significantly more mess and was one of the best mornings I can remember. We went to the park. Rosie ran. She climbed. She fell once and cried for approximately 45 seconds and then got up and climbed again. She made friends with another child she had never met with the effortless social ease that small children have before the world teaches them to be cautious. We had lunch at a small cafe she liked. She ate half her sandwich and all of her apple slices and asked 3 times whether we could get a dog, and I said the same thing I always said, which was that we would think about it, which both of us understood to mean not right now but someday is possible. We came home. She napped. I sat in the quiet of her napping and I let myself feel whatever I was actually feeling, which was not triumphant and not entirely at peace but something more honest than either of those things. I felt sad. For the version of my mother I had always hoped she was capable of being. For the occasion I had missed. For the photograph that would have a gap where Rosie and I should have been. And underneath the sadness, something steadier. I had chosen my daughter. On a day when I was given the choice between the image of the family and the actual member of it, I had chosen the actual member. That felt right in a way that sitting at that party, without Rosie, never would have. My aunt called me on Sunday. Her name is Margaret and she is the woman whose 60th birthday the party had been for, and she is, of all the members of my family, the one I trust most. She has always been honest with me in a way that my mother finds uncomfortable and that I have always found essential. She said, I missed you and Rosie yesterday. I said, I am sorry we were not there. Happy birthday, Auntie Margaret. She said, your mother told me what happened. Her version of what happened. I said, what was her version? She said, that you had overreacted to a practical suggestion and decided to make a point at my expense. I said, that is one way to describe it. She said, I want to hear your way. I told her. All of it, the first call, what my mother had said about Rosie and the photographs, the second call, Saturday morning with pancakes and the park. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Bella, I want you to know something. I have known your mother for 58 years. I love her. But she has always valued the look of things over the substance of things, and it has cost her more than she understands. She said, I would have rather had Rosie at my party running wild through every photograph than had the perfect photographs without her. I want you to know that. I said, "Thank you, Auntie Margaret." She said, "And I want you to know something else. What you did on Saturday was exactly right. Not because it made a point, but because your daughter is 3 years old and she deserves to know that her mother will choose her. Every time." I held the phone against my ear and I felt something ease in me that had been tight since Tuesday and why mother did not call me for a week. When she did, she opened with the same pleasantries she always opened with and I answered them and waited. Then she said, "I have been thinking about what happened." I said, "Okay." She said, "I think I handled the conversation badly." I said, "Which part?" She said, "The part where I suggested Rosie not come." I was worried about the day and I was thinking about the photographs and I said something that I did not think through properly. I said, "Mum, you told me my 3-year-old daughter would ruin the photos." That is not something that was said without thought. That is something that reflects how you actually see the situation. She was quiet. I said, "I am not saying this to be unkind. But I need you to understand something. Rosie is not a disruption to be managed at family occasions. She is a member of this family. And if the photographs are more important than her presence, then I think we have a real problem," and why mother said, "The photographs are not more important than Rosie." I said, "The phone call suggested otherwise." Another silence. She said, "I know." I heard myself after I said it and I knew it came out wrong. I want things to look right. I always want things to look right. And Rosie she is so much, Bella. She is so much energy. I said, "She is 3 years old. She is supposed to be so much energy. That is not a problem with Rosie. That is just Rosie." My mother said, "I know that. I do know that." I said, "I need you to show Rosie that you know it. Not in the phone calls to me. In how you treat her at family occasions." She said, "I can do that." I said, "I hope so. Because she loves you. She asks about you. And I want her to grow up knowing that her grandmother loves her back, all of her, not just the version that fits in the photographs." My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I love all of her. I want you to know that." I said, "Then show her." The next family occasion was Christmas. I attended with Rosie. My mother had, in the weeks between our conversation and Christmas, made what I can only describe as a visible effort. She called Rosie twice on the phone, not to talk to me, to talk to Rosie. She sent her a small gift in the post that arrived before Christmas with a card that said, "For my wild and wonderful Rosie, with all my love." Wild and wonderful. I read that card 3 times. At Christmas, Rosie was exactly herself, loud and energetic and present in every room she entered. She knocked something over. She interrupted a conversation between adults at least 4 times. She refused to sit still for the group photograph for approximately 6 minutes before deciding she was ready. My mother, to her credit, said nothing about any of it. She did not visibly tense when Rosie ran. She did not redirect with the tight smile I had seen at previous occasions. She sat on the floor at one point and played with Rosie for 20 minutes while the adults talked around them, and I watched my mother on the floor with my daughter and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. The specific, careful kind that arrives when someone shows you, through action rather than words, that they have heard something you said. The photographs from that Christmas included several of Rosie mid-run. Rosie with food on her face. Rosie in the middle of a laugh so big it had closed her eyes. My mother printed one of them and put it on her mantelpiece. Rosie does not know any of this story. She is 3 years old. She does not know that she was excluded from a party. She does not know about the phone calls or the week of silence or the conversation where I told my mother that she needed to show Rosie she loved all of her. What Rosie knows is that her grandmother got on the floor and played with her at Christmas. That there is a photograph of her laughing with her eyes closed on her grandmother's mantelpiece. That when she sees her grandmother's face does the thing that faces do when they are genuinely glad to see you. That is what Rosie knows. And that is, I think, exactly what she should know. She is 3 years old. She is supposed to move through the world with complete confidence in her own welcome. She is supposed to run and laugh and knock things over and interrupt conversations and do all of the things that 3-year-olds do in the full and certain knowledge that the people who love her as she actually is. My job, the only job that matters, is to make sure she has that knowledge. To make sure the world she grows up in, and especially the family she grows up in, reflects it back to her. I made a choice on a Saturday in a park with pancakes still on Rosie's shirt. I chose her. I will always choose her. I am 30 years old and my mother asked me to leave my 3-year-old daughter at home because she would disrupt the family photographs. I said no. And in saying no, I learned something that I think is worth telling you. The image of a family is not the same as the family. The photograph on the mantelpiece is not the relationship. The perfectly composed table is not the love. And the version of occasions that is curated for a record is not the version that children carry with them, not the version that becomes the foundation of who they believe themselves to be. What children carry is simpler and more important than any photograph. They carry whether they were welcome. Whether the people who were supposed to love them actually showed up for the version of them that existed, rather than the version that would have been convenient. Whether, when they were too loud or too wild or too much, someone said, "You are exactly right, exactly as you are, and I want you here." That is what I wanted for Rosie. That is what I wanted her to carry. So I chose the park over the party. The pancakes over the photographs. My daughter over the perfectly composed image of a family occasion. And my mother, slowly, imperfectly, with the genuine effort of someone who is working against their own deepest habits, is learning to choose the same thing. The photograph on the mantelpiece shows a child laughing so hard her eyes are closed. It is the best photograph in the house. My name is Bella Wandi. I am 30 years old. My mother chose perfect photos over her own granddaughter. I chose my daughter over the whole family party. And I would do it again without a second's hesitation. That is my story. She wanted the perfect photograph. I wanted my daughter to know she was welcome. On Saturday, I chose the daughter. I always will. Thank you for listening. This is Haely Stories. We will see you in the next one.